January 4th, 2001. I turned 6 months old, people were still hungover from the New Year's parties, and more importantly, a legend was born. MMOs have been a staple of the gaming world for many years, even before this date with the likes of EverQuest, Ultimate Online, Meridian 59, and even before all of these, there were still the likes of multi-user dungeons, or MUDs as they're more affectionately known. It's fair to say MMOs, or more precisely MMORPGs, are one of the most influential, well-known pieces of gaming media. That being said, only two have maintained relevance for what would be perceived as a remarkable amount of time, and those would be World of Warcraft and one legendary game which has been around even longer than Blizzard's oh-so-dwindling baby. That game would be RuneScape. RuneScape has been around in many forms, with these versions being dubbed RuneScape Classic, RuneScape 2, and the two current versions which would be RuneScape 3 and OSRS, or Old School RuneScape. In this video we'll be taking an in-depth look at RuneScape in all of its amazing, oh so amazing forms, and finding out why a game with such a simplistic gameplay style and graphic style, even in its newest form, can survive for 21 years and still be one of the most highly populated MMOs, along with the likes of World of Warcraft and the newer, more graphically demanding Final Fantasy XIV. For a little bit of context, I've been playing MMOs for over a decade now, and even before that I was still playing the likes of Adventure Quest, Club Penguin, Habbo Hotel, and of course RuneScape, you know, all the browser MMOs. However, back before getting into World of Warcraft in 2010, I was a very casual player of pretty much any PC game, leaning more in favour of Halo 2 and Star Wars Battlefront and the likes on console. Of course, I had played RuneScape prior to the update to what is now RuneScape 3, but I was never too deep into it. In fact, my original account has been long since lost to the likes of a mysterious man sitting behind a computer screen with a very cool set of shades, and a trench coat and a green and black scrolling number wallpaper on said computer screen. I think they called him Leo or something. Anyway, back on topic, even back when I was playing RuneScape for the first time, I was still very late to the party, around 6 years late to be precise. So that being said, let's head back to January 2001. So, I said we'd be heading back to 2001, and yes we are, but whilst we are in 2001, let's read a book documenting the past 3 years. Because of course we're in 2001, time machines don't exist yet. The year is 1998 and three brothers, Andrew, Paul and Ian Gower, had been working on something I mentioned earlier on in the video, a MUD. This was the original version of RuneScape, it was called Devious MUD. However, for reasons unknown to me, the Gower brothers decided to scrap this MUD, and it never ended up being publicly released. However, 1 year later they completely rewrote it, and this time they did very briefly release the game. However, this was only a public beta and it only ever saw the light of day for around 1 week. That leads us to the new year of 2001, and we can now close the book of the 90s and look to the new century. The year had only just started, and as I previously mentioned, everyone was still hungover from their New Year parties. That is everyone but three men, the Gower brothers. They were gearing up for a release of their newly graphically overhauled version of Devious MUD, RuneScape. This release would see the beginning of a long-lasting game, which currently, in 2021, according to the RuneScape wiki, has over 10 million players, with over 9.5 million free accounts, and over 500,000 paying subscribers, and I'm proud to be one of them paying members. Anyway, at the start, the game, which now hosts over 10 million people, was actually run from the Gower brothers' parents' house. In December of 2001, Jagex was founded and a fourth member was brought on board with the likes of Constant Tedder. Right, that was a very long origin story, and I promise I'm not just going to repeat everything on the RuneScape wiki. I just wanted to give some context to the humble beginnings of a now legendary game. Now then, let's see what the game looked like in 2001. If you know anything about RuneScape, you'll know that skills are pretty much everything in the game. Unlike other MMOs that have what would now be considered more traditional levels, RuneScape doesn't and didn't have a character level system. Instead, you have skills. And originally in RuneScape 1, or Classic as I'll refer to it from now on, there were 18 skills. These were Attack, Defense, Strength, Hits, Ranged, Prayer, Magic, Cooking, Woodcutting, Fletching, Fishing, Firemaking, Crafting, Smithing, Mining, Herb Lore, Agility and Thieving. However, not all of these skills were available to everyone. You see, in 2002, Jagex introduced the membership program, where you paid to get access to extra areas, quests, and skills, along with other features. So because of this, 4 skills were locked to members. These were Agility, Fletching, Thieving, and Herb Lore. Obviously, with RuneScape being an RPG, it's going to have quests. However, as previously mentioned, RuneScape does not have a traditional leveling system, so this means that the game cannot simply lock off a quest until you're high enough a level to complete it. So to counter this, a quest point system was implemented. This works as follows. You start off being able to complete 1 or 2 specific quests. From these you learn some points in experience for skills and related stuff related to the quest, but you'll also earn some quest points, and accumulating these points unlocks more quests. So with that out of the way, let's talk about a few of my favourite quests, and I'll expand on these further when we get into further versions of RuneScape. We'll start with a couple of free-to-play quests. My favourite early game quest just so happens to be free-to-play, and even better, it requires no quest points to start, so just head over to Draenor to get started with it. This would be Ernest the Chicken. In this quest, a couple get lost and stumbled upon a vampire's manor. Not that you necessarily know at this point in the game that it's a vampire. Anyway, Ernest goes into the house to ask for directions, but Veronica was worried about how long he was taking, so she asked you to go check on him. Well, once you enter the manor and do a few trivial tasks, you find out that Ernest has been turned into a chicken, and it's your job to turn him back. It's quite an amusing quest actually, and I rather do enjoy it. Obviously, Dragon Slayer is a favourite, but it should be a favourite for any player, I imagine. Essentially, Dragon Slayer is endgame for free-to-play. Once you beat this quest, you've done all of the quests you can, pretty much. Unless you buy a membership, that is. I won't spoil Dragon Slayer for you, but it is a complete blast, if not quite a chore to complete. My favourite members quest will probably always remain the same, and it's called the Grand Tree. Essentially, you make your way into a gnome village that resides within a massive tree, the Grand Tree. It's a magical tree for some reason or other. It's been a while since I did it, but I can't quite remember why it's magical. Anyway, the objective of this quest is to cure the sickness of the tree, and I'll just say one thing that makes this quest so great. Gloth. The world of Gielinor is an amazing place. It's full of surprises around pretty much every corner. Every boat trip you take, every glider flight you embark on, every cave you delve into, who knows what adventure you'll get up to there. Now, whilst there is apparently no recorded world map from back then, I did find this on the fandom wiki. Anyway, let's move on to the finale of RuneScape Classic, Halloween 2003. In MMOs these days, they all have an event depending on the holiday. Like at Christmas in World of Warcraft, you get to go see Santa in Ironforge and get a variety of daily quests, including baking cookies and things like that. At least that's what it was when I last played. And more relevant to the point, this year in RuneScape we got a Halloween event where we had to save the monastery by scaring off the new buyer by pretending to be ghosts. But Halloween in 2003 wasn't quite as spectacular. However, it was still pretty cool by the looks of things though. The only thing I can find out about it is that on 2 days, October 31st and November 2nd, 2 different scythes were dropped. However, you could only own one of them, so if you wanted to pick up the second one in November, you'd first have to drop the one from October. However, if you ever lose your scythe, you could talk to the owner of the clothes shop in Varrock to regain it. And with that, we move on to December 1st, 2003, and on this day, RuneScape 2 was born. On that crisp winter's day in 2003, RuneScape 2 did not release. And I know I just said it did, and I know you're probably confused, and I am being deliberately vague here. You see, RuneScape 2 did initially launch in a beta on that December's day, where paying members could carry their characters over with all progression except for quest history. This was because Jagex wanted to test out all of the features of the game, and of course if you're carrying over a character that has done everything and all the quests, then why would you even bother? You can't do the quests or any of the content, so there's no real point. This was the best way to get the game tested. Another change that was made for the beta was the Lumbridge Teleport was now available to cast for free with no runes required. This was a get me unstuck feature, where if you ever found yourself in a game breaking glitch and got trapped, you could automatically escape. Skip forward to March 3rd, 2004, and Phase 2 of the beta begins. This time characters were copied over as they were in Classic. All quests and stats copied over with the characters, and also the rune cost for the teleport was reinstated. So basically it's a normal carryover. Finally, on the 17th of that same month, the final stage of the beta begins. This time free-to-play players were able to play as well, and that is really the only change to this stage. At the end of the month, the transition completely happens. March 29th, 2004, RuneScape 2 is now live, and Classic is now a thing of the past. Along with the new name, RuneScape 2 brought a major overhaul to a lot of mechanics, more notably of which would be the combat system. Most importantly to that, the complete feel of combat was changed, and we now had a more recognisable style where we can freely move around, use a ranged or melee attack, or eat while still fighting. Also, changes were made to the core playstyle for both mages and melee combatants, with mages now being able to auto-cast spells if they had a staff equip, and fighters being able to choose an attack type, like stab, crush, slash, all of which weapons had different favoured styles for. However, the most infamous addition to the update was the duel arena. This became the only area in the game players would be able to duel, outside of the wilderness phase. This was a great feature which I unfortunately never got to try out. That may have been a blessing in disguise, however. Like I said, this was the most infamous addition in the update. There are many videos on this site explaining why this is, but I'll give a brief summary anyway. Essentially, in the duel arena, you could essentially bet against your opponent in your fights with gold. This isn't bad outright, but when you add the equation that many people were real-world trading to sell gold on various websites, it almost became a real money bet at times, where people would bet against each other insane amounts of in-game gold, and the winner would potentially have the insight to sell the gold online to another player, which is completely against terms of service, not that it stopped anyone. Or, if you lost, you might have just gone broke in the game, depending on your bet, and then you might have just been inclined to spend money on one of these sites to buy your gold back. This essentially started a never-ending loop and addiction of buying gold to bet with, only to lose it again and then buy. It caused many people to get what is essentially a gambling addiction. Like I said though, there are some great videos online about this, so I'd highly encourage you to look them up if you are interested. Throughout its lifetime, RuneScape 2 added many more things, including more quests. There were dozens of quests added over the lifetime of RuneScape 2, making it impossible to list every single one of them here, as I wouldn't even know where to begin. Also, a little bit of an extra dilemma is added, as RuneScape 2 technically still exists today. After many different updates and upgrades, it was eventually resurrected as old school RuneScape, which is still the current way of playing any of these classic quests with the old graphic style. But because of this, they have added more quests since the resurrection. So I don't know whether I should add them to the list or not. But I think I'll at least look into this when we get into the old school RuneScape section. I couldn't rightly finish the segment on RuneScape 2 without mentioning the update in 2008, however. This was dubbed the High Detail Update, or RuneScape HD. I don't think I really need to go into much detail on this though, as the name pretty much says it all. Essentially, this brought about better lighting and textures and shadows, along with a cutscene on the login screen. Now we move on to 2013 for the penultimate topic of this video, RuneScape 3. After much hype from the previous 6 months or so, on the 22nd of July 2013, RuneScape 3 released to the world. RuneScape 3 brought a bucket load of changes to the game, the most obvious being the look and style of the game. You may have noticed two different graphic styles in the background of this video. These are the two different versions of the game that are current, the more modern of which is RuneScape 3 and the classicer of the two is old school RuneScape. As you can see, this is the most major graphical overhaul the game has seen. RuneScape 3 is the current version of the game. Well, technically there are two current versions, which would be RS3 and old school RuneScape, but we're only talking about RuneScape 3 in this section. Anyway, RuneScape 3, what changed? Well, actually a lot stayed the same, including quests and stuff. There was new quests added, but it just had a new look to it really. Of course there are tons of new features as well, one of the main new features being the combat system. If you go back and watch some of my previous RuneScape 3 content, you'll see that we now have an action bar. This allows you to fight like you would in more modern MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft. But of course we still have the ability to craft our own weapons and armour, right? So has this feature still been the same, or has it changed? Well, it's changed quite a bit actually. Now when you're mining and smithing, instead of just clicking and waiting, it's more involved. When mining, you now get the ability to perform critical hits on the ore by clicking the ore deposit when it has a yellow glow around it. This can yield more ingots being brought into your inventory. And now when smithing, you have the ability to make sure your ingot is hot to forge a sword or a piece of armour quicker. Another new feature I quite like in the current game is a minigame that you can do every month or so to be able to build a statue. In turn, it gives you prayer points. It is quite cool. Right, that's the positives out of the way. Now let's get on to why I don't play RuneScape 3. And that is, it's microtransactioned to hell. You can buy cosmetic skins, ability boosts, equipment, pretty much anything you can imagine which makes the process of RuneScape fun can now be bought. And it's not even like it's subtle. You're constantly prompted to buy the keys for the chests in order to unlock the items. The only reason I have any keys or outfits is because I've grinded for them. And no, it's not fun. You do get free keys for being a member. I think it's daily, so that's how I've got the keys that I have. And when you open the chests, you can convert your rewards, the boosters, and stuff into ornaments. These can in turn be used to buy certain outfits, but I just wish it was like the old school RuneScape, where every level you get, every appearance you have, every piece of equipment for skilling you need is all earned by grinding. It genuinely is how RuneScape should be played, and don't get me twisted, I'm not saying in any way RuneScape 3 is not fun, because I do quite enjoy the gameplay. It's just that it kind of feels pay to win. Ooh, this video is quite long, and thankfully you won't have to suffer my voice for much longer, as we're in the final segment for the history of RuneScape. For this, we remain in 2013, but we go back to February. In this month, a vote was posed to the disgruntled players who were not happy with the way RuneScape had been headed the past couple of years. This vote was a simple one. Would you, the players, like us to bring back RuneScape as it was in all of its glory in the state it was in 2007? Or shall we just keep going with RuneScape 3? Well, you can probably guess what the players voted for, but I'll spell it out for you anyway. The players voted for a smaller team to maintain a second server, which turned into old school RuneScape. This would keep the classic RuneScape alive, and I'm really glad they did that. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, my first experience with RuneScape was back in 2007. So having a server going back to how it was when I was a child is amazing. Old school RuneScape obviously didn't have too much change when it was brought back, it simply brought back the old game. Jagex have added new quests and other things over the years, but there's only one more thing I'm going to talk about in this video. RuneLite. RuneLite is a third-party client for old school RuneScape, and yes, it is recognised and okayed by Jagex. Why am I bringing it up though? Well, this is actually the way to play RuneScape. You should always use this. With RuneLite, you can legally add plugins to your game, a bit like you can with World of Warcraft. These plugins include features such as quest helpers, UI changes, and tons of other stuff, but my favourite one is the HD textures update which came out very recently. Fully customisable for your machine all within the client. The HD plugin had a bit of controversy surrounding it in a moment that I think Jagex really screwed up their public image, at least for a few weeks or so. But no company comes out unscathed after 21 years now, do they? But controversy aside, that brings us to the end of the history of RuneScape. Now I have missed out a few things, but I know absolutely nothing about these things, and the bits in this video are scrounged from the research I could do and managed to the best of my abilities. But that, my friends, is where we are almost 21 years later. In fact, in just a month's time, it will be 21 years later. I do want to just shout out 25 Buttholes, who has a brilliant name by the way, whose footage I conveniently found on my hard drive for that piece on the Halloween quest from this year. If you have enjoyed this look back at RuneScape, then leave a like, and let me know in the comments if you do play RuneScape, which was your favourite version of the game, and what do you want to see in the future. Until next time guys, enjoy the world of Gillinor.